Everybody. I'm Jackie K. Cooper, and we have a special interview today. Mark Isham. Now, am I pronouncing that right, Mark?
Actually, it's Isham, long I.
Isham. I got
Right.
you.
It has its roots in Middle England, the town of Isham, hamlet on the River Ise. There you
Oh my
go.
gosh. Oh my gosh. There we go. But I have been hearing about you for a long time. Your music is fantastic, and you're involved. The reason we're talking is because you're involved. You did the score for the Unbelievable Weight of Fantastic Talent or something. I think I got the name right.
Yeah.
The Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
That, as when this airs, will already be in theaters. So tell me, how did you get associated with this project?
Well, Hollywood is a strange machine here. The word goes out that a composer is needed, and I remember making a demo to be considered for this quite a while ago, and their first choice was someone else, and then that someone else, I guess, didn't quite work out, and so they called me back and said, "Would you come in and do this job for us?" And I said, "Absolutely. I still love the idea." And it turned out that the idea was even better than I thought when I first heard of this film. The execution of it is just brilliant. It's such a clever idea, and to have Nick as Nick, the whole thing has just turned out to be at a level that I couldn't even imagine. So it was such a pleasure to get the call and to be included in the whole thing.
But you said you submitted like a demo the first time. They gave you the outline of a script or the outline of a plot, and then you made up some music you thought would go along with that?
Well, no, I didn't do demo original music. I took music from my back catalog and sent it in, which is normal procedure for
Okay.
composers. They say, "Are you interested? What music of yours do you think might be appropriate so we can judge what you might do?" And I sent that in. But you get a two-line description that Nick Cage is out of work and he gets this call to go to a party and it becomes an action movie. Well, that doesn't do this any justice,
Yes.
So I can understand why any music that anybody would send in wouldn't necessarily convince anybody of what the real answer to scoring this film would be. And it wasn't until I got in there and got my hands dirty that I figured it out. And I think at the end we came up with some really, really equally clever ideas as the script demanded.
I was preparing for this interview, so I went back and listened to different scores that you had written for different movies, and you've done some tremendous work. But your music runs the gamut.
It does, yeah. Well, I've been in this a long time, so I've had an opportunity to write a lot of different types of scores. And I think at first, Hollywood likes to stereotype and typecast you, but over the years, I've managed to break down some of those ideas about who and what I am artistically. And you're right, I have done a lot of different types of music, and
some were very jazzy, had
Yeah.
a strong jazz element. Others were these melodious scores, like A River Runs Through It, was just
Right.
melodious, and just different avenues. I mean, I couldn't pin you down. Hollywood may
Well,
have tried, but I can't.
well, I don't think they can right now. I think it's always an interesting educational step for me to talk to a new director, just to explain, my background and what I can bring to the table. In a film like this, the fact that I have a wide variety of experience in a wide variety of genres was of a great help, because comedy films generally will benefit from quick changes of genre. You go from something sort of silly to something very serious that can actually accentuate the humor. And I think that experience that I've had was very helpful in this particular film.
Yeah, well, from my research, your mother was a violinist, your father was a professor. Do I have that right?
You have that right.
How did you get into the movie composer business?
Well, it actually came sort of late in life for me. Although my mother used to tell me that I would sit down when I was a youngster, and only with a few piano lessons under my belt, I'd sort of sit there and bang on the bottom and say the monster's coming in, and the monster is saved. And so I seem to have had a predilection to tell stories with music, even from a kid.
That's
But I
fantastic.
started off, as you mentioned, I started off as a jazz musician, and really only when I was specifically offered an opportunity to score a film did I even consider doing that. And I was offered the opportunity, and I dove in without really any knowledge or background in it whatsoever, but basically taught myself by doing it. And I've been teaching myself ever since.
That, you know, I guess talent just is there. Because if you were to say something like that to me, it would be like, "Are you kidding me?" I know where middle C is on the piano, that type thing. But just to me, to have so much music inside you that comes out in so many different ways is just phenomenal. And
Well, a lot of it is the inspiration of the project. I mean, we early on decided. In fact, my pitch to the director when they said, "Well, we'd like you to come in and score this picture now. What would you do?" I said, "Well, show me the picture. Let me actually get in there so I can give you an honest and educated opinion." I said, I think this needs sort of a timeless, almost spaghetti western type feel, where you're not afraid to just hit it right on the face and have those tremolo guitars or the wailing soprano voice or some of the great hallmark signs of Morricone and Lalo Schifrin and some of the great traditional, you know, Western composers.
right,
And I pitched this, and they said that sounds fantastic, and we kept
that's always a
that.
nice reaction.
So
You like
again,
what
that's
you like.
yeah, exactly. So we that concept survived about 50% of the picture. It got killed in other areas of the picture, but I think as an overall entryway into the picture, it was very, very helpful.
Mark, like I said, I've been familiar with you. I'm one who loves movies, love movie soundtracks, that type of thing. But I grew up, I'm older than God, but I grew up when the composer was almost featured in the advertising, Dmitri Tiomkin and Max
Right.
Steiner. And there have been great composers who have been recognized, and you've been one of them that I've seen, music of Mark Isham. But it seems like today that's being played down more, that you don't get the credit. I'm saying you don't get the credit you deserve. Do you feel that way, or do you feel like it's still a strong voice for the industry, et cetera?
I see that most people are quite respectful of the composers. I mean, the composer is one of the few people, along with the screenwriter or the authors, that face a real blank page. There's nothing there, and
Yes.
you have to dredge it up. And I think that role is still quite respected. And having said that, there's a style of scoring and style of using music in films that seems to go through different waves, shall we say. There's definitely the days when Indiana Jones would come on the screen, and there'd be no doubt that theme would be playing, and it would be loud, and you wouldn't hear anything else. Those days have sort of shifted. Now it's the sound of the cars and the sound of the Batmobile, and that's what you
Or
hear.
the
And the music,
explosions or whatever.
exactly. And so I think we're in a period of filmmaking style now where not certainly not all, but many films the music plays sort of second fiddle sonically, just in the palette of the sound that you get. But that changes. It changes. I've probably seen a couple of peaks and valleys in my own career. Just a period of 5 or 6 years where the music is really featured, and then you go through 5 or 6 years where, well, we're going to fight sound effects for the next half a decade or maybe a decade.
I know this is, like asking an author which of your books is your favorite, that type of things. People never like to answer, but is there one movie score that you do feel the most proud of or most
Well,
accomplished?
that's an interesting question because I've done a lot of different films. I've worked on a lot of different films for a lot of different reasons, and some of them are, well, the film is too brilliant, and I don't care if there's any money. I don't care if I hate everybody on the the project. The film is just too good to not do, all the way down to doing a film for no money just because you love the people and you want to be a part of the experience, and all sorts of balances of these reasons why you do things. So there's a number of films that I feel I've done some really tremendous work on that maybe the film hasn't been so successful. There was a wonderful Brian De Palma film, for instance, called The Black Dahlia, that I did end up getting an award for that. But for me, it was a real triumph that I had never written quite so broadly for symphony orchestra in that sort of film noir style, which I love. And it was an opportunity to do that, and that's what I'm really, really proud of. But then you can't look at a film like Crash, which was, of course, a hugely successful
Yes.
Academy Award-winning film, and I think I also there's a case where we had no money, and it was all done in my living room, um, but it ended up, being what it ended up being, and
Yeah.
I'm very proud of that as well.
Well, you said a while ago, that you told the movie makers on this film, let me see the film and then I can suggest something I can bring to it. Do you have a time frame, like, okay, we've completed the movie, now we need the score, you've got 2 weeks to get it done? Does it work
Oh,
that
there's
way?
definitely a time frame. It's a little more than 2 weeks, but
Thank goodness.
although I have had as little as 3 weeks to do an entire score, and that's difficult, to be honest with you. That's I call my agent and say, what do you mean? Who thinks that's possible? But then, of course, you figure out how to do it. Usually, it's anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks, for a full feature film.
Now, I talked to another person who's a composer, and I was asking about how he got his music, and he said, "There's music constantly in my head." Are you that way, or do you just have music constantly going, and you say, "Oh, I'll use this," and you pull that out, or whatever? Are
I do. I do. I live with music in mind, pleasantly. It's not
That'd be
a
great.
evil
It'd be like a
distraction.
soundtrack to your life.
I think the problem is, it's in that creative universe, so how do you capture that quickly and put it into something tangible, like a sheet music or a recording or something? And that's always, the burden of technology and the various different things that we use to do that. But that's the process. So you're just capturing those right moments of imagination and putting them into the physical universe.
I apologize if this is a dumb question, but you're the composer, you write the music,
Yeah.
and then do you orchestrate the music? Do you conduct the orchestra and all
It,
that?
it it depends on the process. I must say that 99% of the time, the schedules on film and television, especially television, are so tight that I don't have time to do those other jobs. That as I'm finishing writing, the orchestrator's starting orchestrating. And when we're recording, I'd want to hear the recording on that first pass. I don't want to have to conduct and then come back and play it again for me to hear it. So just for a pure time factor, I usually do give up those two jobs. Although I enjoy them, I'm also very fortunate that I work with orchestrators and conductors who are better at those jobs than I am. So I feel it's the best decision to do it that way.
But that's an individual process. You do, if you're not doing the orchestration, then you it's not like what I have a partner who does the orchestrating. That's completely up to whoever's buying the project or whatever to pick the orchestrator.
No, no, no. I have my own personal orchestrator.
Okay.
I've worked with him for 25 years, and we have a shortcut, and I can say, "Oh, you remember that thing we experimented with? Well, here's a chance to use that."
Okay, that makes
Yeah,
much
yeah,
more sense to me
yeah,
than somebody just coming in and taking your work
yeah.
and going with it without
I
your.
think in my entire career, I've only really worked with two main orchestrators. I mean, these are very personal relationships, and likewise with conductors. I mean, I have one guy that I go to if he's available, and because I know that they understand me. They're an extension of me, and they've learned that over the years of working together.
Now, you said you played the piano as a child. Do you play other instruments?
I'm actually a trained trumpet player. That was my
Oh,
first That was my first
I heard a
instrument.
lot of trumpets in your scores, so
I do love the instrument. I was classically trained and then moved into the jazz world. And I think for many years, a number of years, I wanted the career that Wynton Marsalis has. But I didn't quite have that perfection and unbelievable technical skill that Wynton has. Although I was pretty good when I was younger. I gave up the classical side, and I do that really only as a hobby. I still like playing the Brandenburg Concerto occasionally and things like that. But I've kept my hand in as a jazz player, which I really love. I love improvising and even in modern contexts of sort of electronic jam sessions, things like that.
again, going back and doing the research for this, I noticed that some of your music was titled, I think it was The River Runs Through It Suite.
Right.
What does that mean? What
Well,
in a suite?
for public before they started off as people wanted to perform their music with orchestras in concert halls and things like that. And we discovered through just sort of some research that anywhere from 6 to 10 minute suites were what was effective with an audience. To try and play the entire score without picture, sometimes it just is not quite as engaging. But somewhere in that, so we built suites, my orchestrator and I built suites of most of my major scores, and a lot of them have been performed across the world.
And that's just, I'm learning stuff here. I'm really enjoying this. This is information. When you were coming along, and you said you had a career as a musician, and before you got into the composing movie scores, were you who influenced you? Who would you consider the major influencers on you with your
Well, I
career?
think as a musician, it was some of those classical trumpet players, Maurice Andre, I think, and then later when I discovered jazz, obviously Miles Davis, and then a band called Weather Report, which was introduced me to really the fusion of world music and jazz and electronic and classical music. They were a wonderful band for exploring all of those things. And then once I got into film scoring, it really was the couple of the major influences were some of the giants, Henry Mancini, because his great
Of course, you
connection to,
got an award.
yeah, and to his great connection to jazz too, and how he brought jazz, Lalo Schifrin, and then of course the modern composers. I think John Adams is now somebody who I listen to quite a lot just for inspiration of how to write for orchestra. And Steve Reich is another one. These gentlemen have reshaped the face of modern classical music, so I find that very inspiring.
It made me feel bad because I didn't recognize either of those names. So I'm gonna have to bone up on more research there to get to know those. Do you have favorite directors that you like working with, or favorite actors that you like working with, or is
Well,
that
I've been so fortunate. I mean, I've worked with Robert Redford, and Meryl Streep, and I mean, directors. I've worked with De Palma and Sidney Lumet, and I mean, I've just been so fortunate to know and have met even briefly, or I did 4 pictures with Rob Redford, so I got to know him pretty well. And these are probably one of the greatest boons of being in the film industry. Is some of the most amazing talents in the world are here, and you get a chance to meet them and know them and learn from them.
we're gonna have to wrap this up because we only have a lot of time, but I do want to say A River Runs Through It, which Redford directed,
Yeah.
one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. And your score just fits it like a hand in glove. It
Oh, thank you.
it does. It's just going back and hearing it again, and I pulled up some scenes from the movie. It's just such a perfect joining of talent. And I congratulate you on that and on your whole career. And I'm going to be looking for even more.
Oh, well, you're very kind. Thank you very much.
And I really, really appreciate your taking the time to talk to me. I'm fascinated by people of your talent, and I really appreciate you taking the time. So I hope our paths cross again and we get to speak again.
That would be fun. It's a great pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Mark Isham. Thank you very much.